in this one, but edging out the Cleveland Browns 31-23. Josh Allen didn't look himself at times, especially there in the first half, but finishes off with a W and advances to 7-3 on the season. But it was that Buffalo run attack that really plagued this Browns rush defense that's been really the mar of that team all season long. Devin Singletary, 18 totes for 86 yards and a rush touchdown. You also got plenty out of Moss as well. Stephon Diggs, just 5 receiving yards in the first half, did do some damage in the second half, also had a receiving touchdown. All right, we now welcome in James Lofton, who took this one in from the booth. James, it's a pleasure always having you here on HQ, and I want to pick apart some of what you saw from up close and personal.
Sure.
Specifically Josh Allen, and maybe that performance in the first 30 minutes looked better in the second half, but this is a team sort of figuring itself out here in the midst of the season. Looked dominant to start, and then Allen really couldn't get on the mark. Did you see him favoring the elbow at all? What's the issue right now with this passing offense in Buffalo?
Well, you know what? I grew up reading Superman comic books, and in those comic books, Superman would be exposed to kryptonite, but he had no idea where the kryptonite was coming from, so he'd feel a little weak, and then all of a sudden, he'd find out where it was, they'd cover it up with some lead or whatever, and then he'd be his normal self. And I think the same thing for Josh Allen, because he came into this game realizing that he had thrown 6 interceptions over the last 3 ball games, that he led the NFL in interceptions. And so he covered up that kryptonite, and he became Superman in the second half again.
Out of the phone booth and back into action, it's always a pleasure to watch Josh Allen do what he does. We'll get to the Browns side here in a moment, but just to double back on a Buffalo team that really does have the highest of aspirations at this point, and really coming into the season. They were our Super Bowl favorites. They do look human at times, especially those back-to-back losses in the first half of this one.
Sure.
But is it almost beneficial for a team of this talent to experience these moments at this part of the season and maybe not in a couple weeks from now?
Well, we're seeing it all around the league. Look at the Philadelphia Eagles. They're riding that crest. Were they going to be the next undefeated team? How long could they stay undefeated? And I think for the Buffalo Bills, they had 3 losses. 3 losses by a total of 8 points. Just 8 points in total. So those losses were very disappointing for them, and I think that they look at it from a different vision. And Von Miller comes into that locker room, having won the Super Bowl with the Denver Broncos, being MVP in that contest, having won the Super Bowl with the Los Angeles Rams, giving them the type of advice that says everybody goes through adversity. It's how we come out the other side. And so I think that leadership, Von Miller picking the Bills to go to as a team that he thought could be a Super Bowl contender, but now giving them the advice that a Super Bowl contender can give, that a Super Bowl winner can give to that team.
Yeah, we most definitely saw that impact in L.A. a year ago. We'll see if that is the case once again as Von Miller looks for his 3rd Super Bowl with a 3rd different team. It would be something special. James, before we let you go here, a thought on Cleveland, because the headline of that conversation is going to be far different 2 weeks from now with a new quarterback coming back into the fold. How do you sort of keep this group together? Because there was no quit in them here on this given Sunday, but a lot of change is coming.
Well, I watched Jacoby Brissett play today, and I remember when he was a collegiate player at the University of Florida. He had to transfer because he wasn't going to get to play. He had to sit out. And then everywhere that he's been kind of a bridge quarterback. And I asked him about that. He said, you know what? It's okay to be a bridge quarterback because I feel like I'm standing on top of the bridge right now. I know I wasn't the first guy to play this position. I won't be the last, but I'm going to enjoy the view from up top on top of this bridge. And I think that he emanates that same feeling to the rest of his teammates. So I love his attitude, and you saw the fight that he had to come back and throw those touchdown passes late in the 4th quarter in this ball game.
There always seems to be a roster spot somewhere across the league for Jacoby Brissett, and there is always a spot for our James Lofton here on HQ. Thank you, James.
Thank you so much.
Well, the 3-6 defending champs entered tied for the worst 9-game start to a season by a defending champion in NFL history. But the staff is back. Matthew Stafford back after missing last week with a concussion. No Cooper Kupp. No problem early on. Late first, Stafford uncorking one for Tutu Atwell. 2-2 for 6. Rams take a 7-3 lead. That's the longest reception by a receiver not named Cooper Kupp this season. Under a minute to play in the half now. Rams now down 10-7. Stafford finding A-Rob. Allen Robinson getting involved. Not something we've had the chance to say much this season. Rams back up 14-10. Stafford 11 of 17 for $159 and 2 TDs at the half. Completed passes to 7 different receivers. But first New Orleans possession in the second half, that's Andy Dalton to Juice Jarvis Landry, making it 17-14. Landry's first touchdown as a Saint. Rams looking to respond, but Stafford wrapped up, faced immediate pressure by Demario Davis, and he'd be slow to get up. Stafford leaves the game in the third quarter to be evaluated again for a concussion. Did not return. Ensuing Saints possession, 17-14, still 3rd and 9. Right around midfield, Dalton to Chris Olave, the young buck. He can stay to the end zone, 53 yards. Dalton standing in under pressure and delivering a dime. Saints up 24-14. Olave 5 grabs for 102 and that touchdown. Now under 3 to play, down 10. The undrafted free agent Bryce Perkins in at quarterback in relief of Stafford, but no relief to be found. Saints would finish this game with 4 sacks. The Rams now 3-7 after the loss, again tied for the worst 10-game start by a reigning Super Bowl champion in NFL history, Sean McVay, on his first 4-game losing streak as a head coach. 6 seasons of relative dominance, and the struggles have finally found him. 27-20 is your final. This marks the 400th regular season victory by the Saints franchise, so a tip of the cap to the fleur-de-lis, and this one was led by Dalton, 21 of 25, 260, and 3 touchdowns. They also covered the 2.5. The Rams, 0-5 as a dog this season. The over cashes as well. All right, Chris Olave's been not just good, it's been pretty darn great. And if you're looking at most 100-yard receiving games by rookies in Saints history, he's among 2 of the best to ever strap it up, and Marcus Colston and Michael Thomas, now 3 on the season, and still some time to offensively, but there's a whole lot to figure out on the offense. Zach Wilson, 9 of 22, 77 yards, 26 rushing yards. Not going to do it. As for the other side, Mac Jones looked exceedingly human at times as well. 23 of 27 doesn't tell the full story, nor does the 246, but 10-3 is the final, with your only touchdown between these two coming on an 84-yard punt return with just seconds remaining. Marcus Jones, your hero in Foxborough. All right, digging into the dominance with our guys. What a finish it was between these two teams. I do want to go positive here in a couple ways, Tyler, but let's start with 2 teams that coming into the day were in the playoff picture. So I'll ask you the question, did either look like a playoff team to you?
No, and I mean, you're talking about a game or a play that was the most exciting maybe of week 11, and it came in the most boring game on the entire slate. I mean, you're talking about 6 total points up until that point, and neither one of the quarterbacks is really elevating their teams right now. That's the biggest issue for me. You look at both the New York Jets and the New England Patriots, there are pieces on both of the rosters that you can say, all right, there are building blocks. Certainly, Marcus Jones is one of them, it seems like, on the New England side. But right now, both quarterbacks have a huge issue. And whether or not it's a capability, which I think is the question with Zach Wilson, and whether he's able to elevate his team. And the question with Mac Jones is, does he have the pieces around him in terms of the coaching staff for him to succeed, whether it's Matt Patricia and Joe Judge helping him develop in year 2? Those are the massive questions for both of these teams. Clearly, they're well head coached. I do think that Robert Saleh is doing a strong job there. They've made some great additions over the course of the offseason, had a really good draft. It's just the question of, can Zach Wilson be the guy that elevates this team? Everywhere else, they're budding. Everywhere else, you can say that they're a playoff team. But right now, Zach Wilson is the thing that's holding them back from being looked at as a serious playoff contender. Everything else, to me, you can have confidence in, except for the most important position in the sport. And on the other side, you can question all the things that are going wrong with New England, the offensive line, the play calling. Mac Jones has regressed in year 2, and that's the biggest thing that's preventing them from being a legitimate playoff contender in the AFC.
Yeah, I thought today this game would indicate who's going to make the playoffs, and this could potentially cost the New York Jets a playoff game off that punt return or getting into the playoffs. But you look at both offensive lines really struggled. I think Mac Jones was sacked 6 times today. Zach Wilson was sacked 4 times today. Offense, if you were looking for an offensive game, this was the most boring game that you watched on Sunday. But for the New England Patriots to come and to get a big play like that to win the game, it's almost like a walk-off home run in the ninth inning. That will probably propel the New England Patriots into the playoffs, and it may keep the New York Jets out of the playoffs.
Yeah, big moment in this season, and it becomes a big moment once again in this rivalry. And Rick, you've been a part of these matchups and these games where things sort of hang in the balance between one team that seems to have another's number, and it almost becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy after 14 in a row go one way. Does it feel like that at times when you're on the wrong sides of these conversations?
Well, when you talk about is this a rivalry, it's not a rivalry unless you can beat your rival at least sometimes, 50% of the time. You haven't beat them in 14 games, so is this really a rivalry? New England figures out a way every time to beat the New York Jets, and until the New York Jets get over that hump, they're going to struggle to make the playoffs because they can't get through the New England Patriots.
Yeah, and I mean, you look at it with Zach Wilson as well. I mean, he's now 0-4 straight up and against the spread against Bill Belichick in his career. So again, as much as they're building things in a really productive way, I think that if you look big picture on the New York Jets, if you took the playoff implications aside, because I don't think if you asked any New York Jet fan going into the 2022 season, hey, listen, this is a playoff team right out of the gate, I think they'd truthfully laugh at you a little bit. But I think what you could realistically ask of this team is, hey, can you show me signs that you're building towards being a consistent playoff contender? And they're showing you that. They have the pieces in place to be a regular playoff contender, and it feels like they're building towards that over the next couple of years. The only thing that's going to stop them right now is their quarterback. Is Zach Wilson going to be able to take the developmental steps necessary for them to legitimately be a threat week in, week out, and year out to go to the postseason? Right now, I don't think that's the case. He struggles really tremendously when he's pressured, and it felt like a lot of times he was sailing the football over his intended receiver's hands. It just felt like he's been a touch off every time he plays the New England Patriots, and I think it's because of that pressure. He's one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL statistically in passer rating when he's under pressure, and you saw that again on Sunday here in Foxborough.
We most certainly did. The question now becomes, do we have a quarterback? Both of these teams might still be looking for an answer. Jones, 246, gets the job done, doesn't get his offense into the end zone. We had to do that in the third phase. Zach Wilson, meanwhile, did not look great. And yeah, he didn't throw a pick, but also didn't get his team to the end zone. That 0-0 is becoming the way for Zach Wilson. Just 77 yards through the air. Your standout here, Ramondre Stevenson, 13 fantasy points, going to be your headliner.